listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. This week we're back for another episode of our 64 RPG Elimination. It's a bracket fight, so get on your gloves, put up your paws, and let's do it.
Welcome to the party. I'm Barbarian Warlord Scarr.
I'm Sean.
I'm Shane, EvilRobotShane.
And I'm still Savage.
Editor.
Nice,
sorry.
Nice round table we got going.
Yeah.
Well, at least it's cordial this time.
Yes, I'm sure there's nothing controversial come up in this battle to determine what is objectively the greatest RPG of all time.
You're just going to have to get ready for my hot takes. This is going to be
Another bracket fight. Another bracket fight, you say?
Are you suggesting that in the year of Cthulhu 2020 that we might need some easy content to knock out before Christmas?
I would never describe this as easy.
No, not a bit. I'm looking forward to the complaints in the comments, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Other easy things Warlord Scarr has enjoyed: the Trail of Tears, Nixelmass, things like that.
All right.
Did I get that right? I'm terrible German. Something like that.
Close enough.
I think you just called me Hitler, so it's fine.
Enough. Close enough.
All right.
Okay.
So, as with all atrocities, we're even-handed.
Yes.
But we've come up with a cunning way of dealing with, first of all, no abstentions tonight. Everybody has to throw rocks. And if we do get caught on a 2v2, then we've agreed an order with which a casting vote is to be decided. Now, some of you out there may say, but you could game that. To which I would say, yes, we're
absolutely.
Gamers.
Yeah, no, that's the point. That's half the point. Of course we're going to game it.
Okay, let's crack on. And I have one last rule. Can't take 20 minutes on the first round.
Watching you, Scarr.
Let's act like the devil is behind us all the way, boys. So, over to our friendly neighborhood warlord.
Okay. So, once again, this is, you know the format by now. If you haven't stopped listening, deleted your podcast, podcast collector and run screaming naked into the night to stop the noise, you know how these bracket fights work now. So, today's first victims are the Fantasy Flight 40k RPGs. There's a list. Starts with Dark Heresy, ends with another Dark Heresy. There's something with Space Marines in the middle. And it is up against GumShoe, the system that creates Trail of Cthulhu, the Esoterrorists.
This will be a short round,
the
then,
Serpentine. Yeah? Sorry?
This will be a short round.
Ooh, we'll see.
Ideally, they'll all be short rounds.
Okay, so starting off, we have other Shane. Okay, so please tell us your in-depth thoughts about these wonderful in-depth games.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a lot of has been said already about these games, of course, to get this far. But right, 40k role-playing games. We were all waiting for ages for one, and then one came out, and it was okay because we were all familiar enough with the system because it was the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay system. But I don't know. Some people love Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, but I find this system really clunky, and also some people like the what is being described as gear porn element of it. I think there's a time and a place for that. Namely Shadowrun. I just find that kind of gets in the way and makes things that are already quite complicated even more complicated. Lovely high production value though. GumShoe, to play, I find kind of a joyless system. It just is not a lot of fun. Allocating those numbers or rolling those dice, that die, that 1d6, I find, I don't know, it just doesn't tickle my fun organ. But I think the variety of games that are in it, and okay, they've both got a good variety of games because it's very different being a Rouge Trader to being a Space Marine to being a Terrified Imperial Guardsman or whatever. But, ultimately it's going to come down to, I like investigative games, really, for me, and that's what GumShoe does well, and it also introduced the idea, which can be put into any role-playing game, of just give the clues if people look for them properly. So GumShoe is my vote on this.
Right. Right. I was trying to recall what I had against GumShoe, and then EvilRobotShane reminded me it knocked out Shadowrun in the last round.
Look.
Boo.
Crimes, like all crimes forgiven. This is a blank slate. Let's go.
Weren't the worst. I have the three initial. Was it Black Library, and then someone else published?
No,
FFG,
the first one,
of course.
First was Black Library, and then the rest were FFG. Exactly.
Yeah, I've got the three of them on my shelves. I had a chance to play a Seneschal in Rogue Trader. It was basically a combat accountant. Great fun. Lots of flavour in there. I actually like Deathwatch as a book to read about 40k stuff, because the system, the kind of collection of worlds they set it in, is rather good. However, we're trying somehow to divine what is good for all tables and all GMs and all players over all of time. GumShoe, I know it's meant to be hard boiled, but is it a bit too boiled down? As EvilRobotShane was saying, it's kind of a bit all on that dice. It's a little bit, let's just get it done. But at least it's quick, and the clue system stands in good stead. I really like the 40k setting, but Exoterrorists and Trail of Cthulhu and Nice Black Agents, a GumShoe game.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mutant City Blues.
Yep.
Mutant City Blues. Don't know that one so well.
Oh, it's great.
These are really good settings. These are really inventive. And 40k is all a bit, well, there's plenty of it. And I think perhaps the setting of 40k is better enjoyed through other avenues than being a combat accountant. But being a hard-bitten dick in any of those other sort of milieus, be it, I know, we're not working blue though. I've said nothing I can't take back. Is actually really, really compelling. I like the vampire dossier stuff. I like the esoteric stuff. So I'm going to give this one to GumShoe.
Okay, I'm up next. Oh god, this is a tough one, and I'm not allowed to abstain.
Don't worry about it.
I've said in the past that I am fully aware that the 40k system is not good, but I feel it is an appropriate level of not good for the setting that it is in. But yeah, it has big problems, and having run a nearly 3-year campaign of it, I gotta say it's an interesting system to go from one end to the other in. 40k is not the kind of setting you love. At least not like it is certainly, it's a comfort setting, I find. It's just like it reminds you of your past and how you really can laugh at what you've done as a child. So it's very difficult for me to say I dislike the 40k systems, but like there's a whole bunch of affection there, but like it's kind of affection I want to be ironic, but isn't really. Where was I going with this? GumShoe looks really, really cool. Has lots of really, really good setting stuff going for it. I haven't actually played it in the flesh, and I feel that's sort of an oversight on my part that I haven't been able to track down a game of it at any point to really get to grips with. This was a close one for me. It's knife edge, but I think I'm going to have to give it to GumShoe based on my which way I play at a con if there was no other factors involved. And I would have to say I would probably be more interested in playing a GumShoe game and trying it out for the first time than I would be trying a random pickup 40k game. So I go for GumShoe.
All down to me then, I guess. Not really, because it's now 3-0. Yeah, for me, I played a few Final Fantasy Flight 40k games. I always thought it was awful. I liked the 40k system well enough, despite the grimness of it, but I just couldn't get past that terrible system. I'm not a fan of percentile systems at the best of times, but I just have not enjoyed a single one of those games. GumShoe, I love. I know it can sometimes not be fun in the dice rolling bits. I often find combat and that sort of stuff to be the weakest parts. But the investigation bits, I've always found great. They always finding the clue. I've got a lot of fond memories of playing Knights Black Agents and also playing Mutant City Blues. Shane nearly threw the book at me when I tried to bring a murder victim back to life many years ago.
That was a poorly written scenario.
It was a very poorly written scenario. I'll remember that forever. So this is a very easy one for me. It's got to be GumShoe.
All right. Well, it looks like GumShoe takes it unanimously.
Bye Final Fantasy Fancy Flight Games 40k. You made a big splash at the start, and then you sort of faded away. Just a point of interest. So how did it get here? First round of bet, the Genesis system. Then managed to beat Earth Dawn. And finally it has come a cropper against GumShoe.
That seems fair.
Yep.
Moving on.
Okay.
What's next?
This is the big one, the one that we've been threatening Séan with for the last month. It is D&D 5th Ed versus Paranoia, the long-standing comedy dystopia RPG.
This is an
and
easy
we will
one.
be starting off with Mick as our first person.
Is this even worth... Hold on. Maybe I could... See, I have to be careful, folks. I am looking at the way this is going to run, who's coming next.
Don't metagame it. Just look what's in front
we
of
just
you
said we'd metagame it.
Come on.
But I think throwing Paranoia...
If you want to do something mental, I'll back you up.
See, oh man, it's like every game I'm in. No, this is pretty simple. D&D 5th Ed has brought so many people to the hobby. It is so many people's touchstone going forward as to what a role-playing game is. Paranoia is a lovely idea, and when executed well, it's even hard to know what executing Paranoia well would look like. There are many different types of 5th Ed game that I think people like to play, but they all, I think, have paragon examples of execution. Okay, if I have problems with 5th Ed, it is probably more to do with how prioritizing of certain things in terms of publication, stuff like that. The system, I've run it, played it, it's fine. And it's still recognizably D&D. I have a great deal of fondness for Paranoia, but it is stunningly niche. And I'm going to have to go with 5th Ed here, just for the sort of generalist appeal.
Yeah, I gotta say, I've never really, Paranoia is the kind of game that requires a sort of perfect storm to run. I feel like you need to have the right GM, the right group, and just the right tone, because it's based on comedy, and comedy is a fragile thing. A forced comedy is some of the worst stuff in the world. It can absolutely be an amazingly fun experience if you can get the right mindset, but it has an inherent weakness that I think that just kind of holds it back as a classic. It's still a perfectly fine RPG, but actually I haven't played much of it, so I maybe just assuming there. But 5th Ed is sort of defined by being the no major weaknesses edition. It is given up a lot of what people would consider strengths in order to have no weaknesses in the eyes of the masses. And thus it sort of has this inherent advantage. It's difficult to find something fundamental to criticize about 5th Ed, and while, as we've seen in episodes we've recorded recently, it can't run everything, it can run under an awful lot of conditions. It can run when half the group is missing. It can run when you're all in jokey mood. It can run when you're all in a serious dour mood. You just want to just beat up some goblins that look like your boss. it's survivable, and I think that's going to carry it here. Paranoia, great if it's great, but if it's not great, it's terrible, and it's just a unfunny joke. But D&D, you'll always have at least something edible.
I won't keep you long, because I've already talked this podcast to death with my love for this particular edition of D&D. The sort of the perfect middle ground of not too hot, not too cold, always just right RPG for my particular flavour of nonsense. It's just a system I love a lot. Paranoia, on the other hand, I feel is a bad joke that people keep telling. I don't think it's ever worked. I don't think it ever will work. I've never seen Paranoia come together as anything more than like a bad time. But man, if I want to play like power fantasy adventuring in a high magic setting, like I can't see myself ever reaching to a system other than D&D 5th Ed. Ever in future. I think it'll always be that for me.
Okay.
So they've lost you on all 6th Ed sales.
Well, listen, we'll see what the future brings, because before 5th Ed came out, I would have said you'd never catch me playing a Dungeons and Dragons game ever again. But I'm not going to predict the future. There, yeah.
Right. I wouldn't recognize a 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons book if I saw it. I've never seen one before. I'm only peripherally aware of the fact that even 4th edition exists. And I like. I haven't played a lot of Paranoia. It's only been con scenarios, and yes, as Sean says, it has never really come together. But I like the fact that it is something that we created. It comes from role playing games exclusively. And I'm assured that it can run well, and of course I'm assured that 5th edition D&D can run well. So, like over the past few years, a lot of my gaming has been LARPing, so I'm going to approach this as a LARPer. I am willing to vote for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons in exchange for we eliminate any other D&Ds as and when they arise.
Yeah, I can vote for that.
No dice. It's not. You do not negotiate from a position of strength.
I do not.
And yet I'm willing to negotiate. Sure, I'll knock out any D&D you want.
No. I owe. There's a family here that I owe some allegiance to. It's not just any particular lordling or lady. There's a lineage here. I have to. There's certain coats of arms I have to put on my shield.
Very well, Mick. You can leave our little group huddled in the corner, talking in low voices, and you can walk around suspiciously slowly near somebody else now. For a while.
I'm going to go off and look at my handful of cards.
Yeah. Okay. Assuming we have an understanding here, then 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is the greatest edition of possibly the greatest role-playing game of all time.
At least that's what we put on the box.
Ooh, yeah. This is going to get spicy. Right, but well played.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I believe that is a clean sweep for D&D 5e.
Oh, and I'd love to hear it.
And just screams coming from somewhere northwest of Dublin. Just howls. Okay, so next up is that wonderful, universal, generic, and roleplay of generic universal role-playing systems. It's GURPS. And it is up against newcomer, indie darling, and Skullduggerous, What's a Thief? We don't know what you're talking about. Game Blades in the Dark, and by extensions, the Forged in the Dark rule set, which is getting quite a bit of play. Okay, so do people need me to explain what this is again?
What Blades in the Dark is, or
yeah, or what GURPS is, if someone really needs to know that.
if you're very quick about it.
Padding.
Okay, so Blades in the Dark is a newer entry game based around a simple system of you have a small pool of d6s, you roll and take the highest. You're looking for 6s to get what you want, but 4s and 5s will get you some of what you want. There's a system for you have a limited pool of stress to avoid bad stuff and cause Ocean 11 style flashbacks, because it's sort of based on a sort of heisty / operationy template. And then there's a downtime section where you do things to get your stress back or do other projects. So it's got it's this interesting structured thing where it's about doing the mission. That the mission is the meat, but you also need to manage yourself between missions to keep things going. Okay, so in this one, I believe it is me going first as I choose between them. And as I've alluded to before, because I'm in all of these episodes, GURPS never really grabbed me as a system. As a excuse for Steve Jackson to sell supplements for every type of genre and licensed product he can find, and put a lot of people into paid work. It's great. It's a nice little ecosystem, and I wouldn't turn my nose up about any interesting supplements I saw in the game store. But as something to run, something to actually try getting through and, making a campaign of, the analogy of it as a set of Legos to play with hasn't really appealed to me as I've gotten older. It's just like, it would require too much mastery for me to feel comfortable with this kind of points buy based system, and I just haven't seen the benefits of investing in it. I understand if you are the GURPS type and the wonderful multiversal campaign of Famed in North Dublin appeals to you, then I understand, but for me, it's never really been grabbed. Blades in the Dark, however, this thing's dripping with system design flavor, and it's this unique. It's this sort of unique. It's actually, it reminds me a bit of Savage Worlds, where it's this rule set that is being applied to a whole bunch of different settings in a similar genre. It's being used for Star Wars style smuggling, for sort of the original is like kind of steampunk thieves and criminals. There's Band of Blades, where you're this fancy mercenary company who have to desperately survive as the world falls apart.
Is Monster of the Week a Blades in the Dark system?
No, I think that's Powered by the Apocalypse. What happened to Powered by the Apocalypse? I feel like
it voted.
Oh yeah, it went up against Call of Cthulhu in round 1 and was crushed.
So, speaking of crushing the hapless.
Yeah. I'm just going to crush GURPS here. Blades, super cool. I really want to play it. I want to hack it. I want to modify it. I want to play, run, everything. Blades is really cool. I'm voting for Blades. Sean.
As you probably guessed my outpost earlier, I've never played a Blades in the Dark game. Every one I tried to think of, I think is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. But if Blades is spinning off as many new systems and as much new thinking in RPGs as Powered by the Apocalypse did, and that's definitely a good thing in my book. Played a lot of GURPS games. At cons mainly. The generic system really led writers just write whatever game they wanted and then just slap GURPS onto it. As a system, it never really impressed me. I guess it just does okay for everything-ish. It never really set my world on fire. I mean, I guess it let a lot of people write their scenarios, but I think I'm going to throw this to Blades in the Dark.
Okay, I don't know Blades in the Dark. I really like the sound of it. It sounds like it's got some really fun ideas and clevernesses and influential philosophy. Although I think I've heard the setting described as steampunk, which immediately makes my trouser contents get smaller. But I mean, if we're gonna be judging any given edition of D&D by the birthrights and the Ravenlofts and all that come in it, and if GumShoe is not, it's fairly uninspiring system, but the Trail of Cthulhu and the Mutant City Blues and Night's Black Agents, then GURPS is just phenomenal. The amount of material for it and the kinds of stuff that I mean, to some extent, were made possible by the existence of this generic system that you could just write a book for. I've said before about the kinds of sort of information source books for it that are, like it's like taking a concept and picking up the Lonely Planet guide to it. Like Special Forces or something like that. I want to learn about Special Forces. You buy the GURPS book. You don't have to use the perks and flaws, but everything else in it is solid gold. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, if somebody hears, oh, this silly podcast did a, what's the best role-playing game of all time, and the answer was GURPS, you'd be like, oh, that's unconventional and uninspiring, but yeah, fair enough. And if it was Blades in the Dark, they'd be like, well, that obviously went through some nutball Swiss tournament system. So I'm voting for GURPS.
Well reasoned.
Ooh, right. This is funny. Weirdly, Blades over the course of his lifetime has managed to turn into a kind of a GURPS-like entity, because the Blades system is now being, as others have alluded to here, is being rolled out for all sorts of different things. Just looking at a list of some of the supplements that are being attached to Blades. You've got Band of Blades, which is effectively if you want to play the Black Company or the Bridge Burners of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Blades Against Darkness, which is a dungeon diving game, essentially. Blades of the Jereg, which is based on the Taltos novels, some of you may be aware of. Then there's a whole bunch of others. Scum and Villainy, it's a Star Wars ripoff. Leviathans, there's a few others. You can go Vigilantes, about playing the good guys, going up against gangs. Blades itself, the base Blades in the Dark, I read it, I backed it, so this probably tells you where my money lies. I backed it, I read it, I got really inspired. It presented an entirely different way of running a game, of presenting the events of a game to players, and it's really structured, and it's really tight, and it's also turned out to be a system you can use for lots of, I wouldn't say it's got the versatility of GURPS. You can't turn it to anything. It's quite finely tuned for a type of game, but that type is has so many different branches that it has spawned its own little sort of community of different kinds of games that will all go back to Blades. GURPS played a fair bit. GURPS is really kind of a gearhead game or system in a sense. You tend to see a lot of World War II stuff, or very kind of mechanically focused in terms of there'll be lots of machinery, lots of guns, lots of different things. I know it has other uses, but it's always been a kind of a hard sci-fi or realistic kind of modern historical setting and system for me. And I've all the time in the world for Steve Jackson. He's a lovely chap. I love the stuff his company does. Blades in the Dark is an intriguing, exciting future for the hobby. They're beautiful books. They're beautiful rules. They are so different. If I had a bunch of people who'd played D&D, because everyone plays D&D to start with now, and they bounced right off and said, is this it? Is this role-playing? We go and beat up some bags of hit points? I'd say, come over here. I've got this other thing. It's kind of the same, but it's kind of brilliant. And it's totally, in terms of how you will run a game, run your characters, run everything, it's really different. And I like different. I like the whole other way you can roleplay that the Blade system introduces players to. And I'm not a new GM. I've been GMing since I was knee-high. But I read the Blades in the Dark rule set.
How high are you now?
Oh, wow. I reached the top of this microphone. So, it's not often I read a rule system, because I generally ignore them, but I read one and learn something entirely new about how to run a game. So all of that adds up to me, unfortunately, having to slide in the knife and give it to Blades.
Yeah, it's 3-1. It's pretty decisive.
Which is unfortunate, because GURPS, hell of a thing.
Well, it survived 2 rounds, which a lot of other systems didn't. It beat out, remember, it beat out Wolfrup. So was it Wolfrup? Yeah, it beat out Wolfrup in a previous round.
On dice, I bet. Okay, well,
check.
here,
You're probably right.
listen, as a little aside, not having played Blades in the Dark, with all these variants of it, is there a way to get into it without going through the steampunky variant, or do you have to like use that as your generic rule set and then find an overlay for it?
Probably you want Band of Blades, or Blades Against Darkness, which are the more traditionally high fantasy. Band of Blades particularly will suit this because you're a company of soldiers marching across a hostile landscape, but it's all fantasy based. Have you read? And I can't recommend the source material Black Company highly enough.
You certainly can't to get me to read it. But does this game exist like as a package, or do you need to get Blades in the Dark and then also get like a supplement for it that allows you to twiddle it?
You should be able to just go ahead.
I don't know. I believe you'd want to have the root game, but I would.
No,
contest.
I think you can just get Bands of Blades on its own.
Okay,
I've
the
seen
thing is,
standalone copy of Bands
I'd
of Blades.
strongly resist putting this in the steampunk category and all of the kind of hellish nonsense that conjures. The closest touchstone, and I know it's adjacent, but the closest touchstone thematically and tonally for this would have to be the Dishonored games.
Dishonored is pretty steampunk, or at least whale hunting punk.
Yeah, it has that. It has this sort of deadly mysticism about it that I think most steampunk kind of misses entirely, and there isn't a bright ray of sunshine to be found in the whole thing.
That's absolutely. I wouldn't put Dishonored with like cogs and stopwatches, but it is like mid 1800s, and the lights are always off, kind of dark.
I can't remember what the computer games are called, but Fallen London is another touchstone for this, and it has. Yeah, I think there's great baked in dourness. Could be a good if you can't stand the World of Darkness scene, Blades isn't a bad place to go. Okay, we've spent enough time burying GURPS and elevating Blades.
What's our last matchup for the night?
Okay, the matchup is D&D 3rd edition. And this is not Pathfinder. Pathfinder is a separate entry. It is.
Sure about that?
Yes, we are very sure about this. This has already been a debate. We've already had this debate. It is not. I was like, okay. It is D&D 3rd ed and 3.5 on its own without any Pathfinder, no adventure paths, no advanced classes. And it is up against the new 40k RPG, Wrath and Glory, which has made it a surprising distance itself. But, yeah. So, the classic of the early 2000s versus the new book that we're still trying to... Is it something like the reprint version is only just really hit stores because of various COVID delays, wasn't it? I think that was a thing, a news item I remember a few months ago.
Cubicle 7 are hammering out books at the moment in an effort to make good on promises they've made earlier in the year, and they're doing an amazing job. But
made a lot of promises earlier in the year.
They made a lot of promises.
And speaking of promises that were made earlier on, by the way, let's not forget which one we're voting on this.
Okay. Well, I'm up first, and let's see. Back alley dealings aside, this won't be a difficult one for me. Dungeons & Dragons 3rd Edition is the first RPG I have ever played, and it was almost the last RPG I ever played because, my God, Dungeons & Dragons 3rd Edition is a terrible game. I have always strongly hated it. Was years before anyone convinced me to try Pathfinder because of my lingering misgivings about Dungeons & Dragons 3rd Edition, and let me tell you, I didn't take well to Pathfinder either. The pages and pages of feats, all sorts of nonsense conditions and whatnots you need to memorize, piles and piles of splat books to give people their +2s and whatever other nonsense. I think it's an evolutionary dead end for the role-playing hobby. Every time someone goes to explore it further, I think they're barking up the wrong tree. Dungeons & Dragons 3rd Edition has nothing to offer me, and never has, and when it loses this vote, it loses it entirely on its own merits, because I've not played Wrath and Glory, and I really can't speak to it. But I'll be giving my vote for Wrath and Glory this time. And Shane, I trust we won't have any problems.
Right. I'd still prefer if you were doing this dishonestly.
It's why it was so easy for me to take the dive earlier.
Speaking of which, Shane, it is your opinion now. I believe you may have a bias or two yourself.
Yeah, well, I didn't know what was coming up. I didn't bother spoilerizing this for myself. But I mean, yeah, third edition D&D, like, I don't like D&D, but I'm surprised that I don't have the level of hatred for it that Séan does. It did the job, but ultimately, I played a really good campaign of it, very long running. But like all the stuff that was good about the campaign was, sort of, despite sort of it being third edition Dungeons and Dragons that we were using as the rules engine, when it came down to like putting miniatures on a map and, trying to move your 5 foot squares and that kind of stuff, that just doesn't do anything for me. Okay, well, if we're getting into settings, then of course we were using it as a generic engine for a more or less homebrew but generic fantasy setting. Yeah, did it bring anything worthwhile or new? Was there any excellent settings? Eberron, people like. That was a third edition thing.
Eberron's also pretty steampunk.
Oh, okay. Wrath and Glory. Now, am I right in thinking that that's kind of an Imperial Guard focused one?
No, it specifically is written. Yeah, it's specifically written so that
it's got a scaling system.
So it's got 4 tiers. Tier 1 would be an Imperial Guardsman. Tier 2, you could be a Sister of Battle or a Space Marine Scout. Tier 3, you're getting up towards kind of Chaos Space Marine or Space Marine. Tier 4 is where you start to get... It's kind of difficult to say then. Inquisitor?
Right.
All things
right.
for all
I think there should be a Tier 0, of course, because you want to be a Necromunda Scummer, that kind of thing. Okay, well, yeah, the world needs a Warhammer 40,000 role-playing game, and it's obviously not going to be the one that we just murdered. Dungeons and Dragons, ultimately, it's a power fantasy game, and like my life is an action adventure power fantasy. I don't need it. I do want to be pretend to be a terrified Imperial Guardsman. That's my jam. Wrath and Glory.
Real humble brags coming from Shane here.
Okay, Mick, it's up to you next.
Right, Wrath and Glory from Cubicle 7, doing great work. I can't quite remember if this is the same system. I think it's the same system or roughly the same system as they're using for Age of Sigmar.
I believe it's the same dice mechanic, but like with a different...
Yeah, D6 pools and a few other things. It's a fairly simple, streamlined system. And no one would ever accuse, and I want to set the record straight here, we should be voting on 3.5, which is the only edition people really ever played of the third eds.
I'm sure some people managed to finish a 3.0 campaign before.
Probably because they weren't willing to spend on the books again. A gripe for another time. 3.5, it's instructive to hear it robbed of so many of its attributes and achievements. It did, of course, drag D&D out of the pile of other systems you might use and put it squarely in the top dog slot for the next 20 odd. Where in the hell was it released?
99, I believe, or was it?
No,
99?
it was 2000. I'm pretty sure. I distinctly recall
20 years of D&D primacy. Oh, everything. Not to some collection of little paperback books or your lovingly illustrated, I must say, second ed stuff. It owes almost everything to the hard work that was done by 3.5. It is mechanically quite sound, if, of course, by current modes, complicated, crunchy, even convoluted. Those are the problems with success. It fleshed out and codified so many of the backgrounds that we love about D&D. Like Faerun wouldn't be anything like what we know today without the acres of ink spilled over it, and not just through the books themselves, but through novels and other bits of fiction that have come out on the back of the success of 3.5, because this was a huge success, and I think it remains one. It gave us character class optimization, which is sort of looked. If you get to a certain point in your D&D, in your gaming lifestyle or lifetime, you come across people who sort of look over your shoulder at your character sheet and sort of tut and go, "Oh, well, you really should be doing this," and you might be tempted to knock them on the nose, put them on their ass, and perhaps you'd even be justified. But they come from a school that learned that actually, if you've got a game this mechanically complicated that has this much stuff going on, it is an awful shame to spend any of your time, if you like power fantasies, playing a suboptimal power fantasy. And every other system that's come along since that tries to do anything near the same level of complexity, including, up to and including the current edition D&D, owes it to the optimization work that went on in 3.5. Because even if it is, as Séan claims, a dead end, and I think all the Pathfinder people would say that's empirically not true, even if you do consider it a dead end, it is at least a fully explored one, that you know not to go there again. Because of 3.5, we have bounded accuracy. Because of 4th Ed, we know not to make numbers too boring or too flat. But Wrath and Glory, I'm sure it's fine. But look, if we're looking for something that is entirely of the hobby, then this kind of licensed spin-off for the model range and increasingly licensed out, maybe even parceled out IP that is GW's money tree, then I think I'd have to go back to the thing that made so much of what gaming is today possible and say, I'm going to give it 3.5. 3.5 mine. 3 was a train wreck. It's awful. Over to you.
Okay. So I'm finishing this out, I guess. Sorry. Stage fright all of a sudden. My gaming career really began in 3.0. Like, I was a bright 17 and 10 months year old when I, first rolled into the College Gaming Society, just wide-eyed with my photocopied 3.0 book, cheekily stolen from an English friend. And it was a massive, wide awakening experience. And all through the heady period, 2008, I believe, was when they finally pulled the plug on that thing. I was pretty staunch a defender of 3.5, less 3.0, admittedly, once 3.5 became very obvious why there'd been a 3.5. Yeah, that system brought me huge joy and also huge consternation as I tried running it, and it was constantly bedeviled by the lie of a CR system and the endless grind of content and 2-hit kills and my own total inability to make any villain threatening for more than half a nanosecond before they exploded. The whole spend 4 hours going through books to optimize them, and then they die in one hit because you forgot to give them a reflex save or something. Yeah, that's... I had a point. I was trying to be positive there. Yeah, no, I have a huge amount of affection for 3.5. Wrath and Glory is a new kid. It is as yet unproven. It hasn't, due to various publication issues, it haven't managed to snag myself my own copy yet, and I haven't heard a huge amount of buzz around it. I certainly loved the previews I've seen of it. There's a wonderful comic book, but a comic showing how it ran, and it looked really cool. And, it had that emphasis on drama, failing forward, moving the game along. It seemed like, compared to the 40k, the FFG systems, it looked like this breath of fresh air in order to make a more dynamic, more engaging 40k experience. It's not something I've specifically played, but it is something that's been on my radar for the last 2 years, and I want to get in it. So this is really a close one for me. it's an old love versus a new flame, as it were. And so I have to sort of apply my barometer of when I play, when I run, etc. And the thing is, I would be happily when I manage to get my Wrath and Glory rulebook, I would happily either play in someone else's campaign or just dive in and start running some 40k game idea. I have 1,000 because of all those FFG ideas I had never got to use because I don't want to cart those books around anymore. But when you look at the same thing for 3.5, I would happily bring all of my old 3.5 books out and make some stupid nonsense character, probably not even optimized, just some nonsense, just some crazy stuff using one of those late game books, like, not even like the Book of Nine Source. I'm talking about stuff like Magic of Incarnum or Tome of Magic, those ridiculous nonsense classes that they made at the end because no one knew how to stop them. But you came to me and asked me to run a third ed or a 3.5 game, I would go very quiet and start mumbling something about NPCs and says maybe there's a decent adventure path. The scales have sort of come off the eyes for 3.5, and it just has a fatal flaw that I'm just not as willing to put in the work to make a D&D 3.5 campaign my own anymore. That's sort of just something born from just the harsh experience of loving it for 8 years straight and then finding new things, moving on to the new things, and then looking back at the old and saying, the fire's not there anymore. So while it is maybe unfair to just hand the victory to an unproven newcomer, I have to vote with what I'm interested in, and what I'm interested in is Wrath and Glory.
Well, that's that.
Well done.
It's the greatest of all time, completely unproven. It's going to beat out 3.5. Remember, and bear in mind, GW are never, ever going to produce a legal document like the Open Gaming License.
Oh, yeah.
Just consider that before you put that nail in the coffin.
Oh, that nail's in the coffin.
God.
I'm sorry that the hammer swinging, Mick, I'm afraid. I do think that there's a lot good to be said about a 3.5. I do think it is still a viable game setting. I gotta say, from my own perspective, you're not going to get me behind the screen of that again. I'll still steal. I will solely steal every 3.5 supplement and just smudge it into 5th ed and run that straight out. But I wouldn't run a as in the book 3.5 game not in 2020.
I think on reflection, it's a bit of a harpsichord, you know? It's a grand thing, but it's far too intricate for these times. No one's really into its sound anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's it. It's done.
I'm excited for the possible future where Rat and Glory, a game none of us have played, sweeps all the remaining rounds and becomes the greatest RPG of all time.
It's going to have to beat Lancer.
Oh wow.
Okay, right. We're done for this lot, and we've yet more brickbats been thrown, staunch defences offered, appeals to wit, reason, heart, majesty, love, a basest of bases for deciding anything. But here we are, another round. That's round 3.2, and that puts us squarely in the last 8, which I believe are traditionally known as semi-finals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, am I right, sports fans?
Well, that depends. Like, there's been suggestion that instead of having like traditional quarter, then semi, then final, that we should have just a run down the last 8 to 4, and then have a fatal 4-way as our finale.
Yeah. I wonder, is there some requirement now to, once we get it down to those fatal 4, do we get the viewers in to cast some votes and maybe lend some weighting to, we could do it Eurovision style. But we'll decide that in the back room.
Yeah, or no, folks, if you guys are interested in swaying the numbers a little and giving it some kind of
wait, or the weight of popular opinion at least.
Yes.
But we'll make no promises on air. We should at least reserve some shred of procedure. We'll make a decision and we'll see. Right, who's going to take us out?
I'm happy to.
Go ahead.
Folks, we do this because we love RPGs, and even if we are unfairly poo-pooing your favorite and consign them to the dust of history, do know that all these games, they made it onto this list because someone loved them, and despite all the mean things they said, the fact that they even got to participate is a good sign that our hobby is a healthy one with a lot of diversity in it. But we must be ruthless as we march onwards. It is our way, and we are down to the last 8: Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Call of Cthulhu, Deadlands, Lancer, GumShoe, D&D 5th Ed. I can hear the screams again. Blades of the Dark and Wrath and Glory, have made it to the the round 4.
Look, every game that made it this far should be proud of itself.
Yeah, hope they are.
Apart from Lancer.
A lot of heads being scratched. But yeah, it's going to be wild. Okay.
Yeah.
Scarr, what do we say at the end of the show?
Well, Mick, we say this party is over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter. Or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license. But you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.